I did tell a story when I taped a special at the Metro in Chicago about seeing the singer of Sam I Am almost get a blowjob on stage. And then now I know the guys. Like, I played the Golden Bowl in Oakland and stuff. He's like, yeah, all right, we were all crazy back then. I'm like, I never thought I'd know you and have to deal with the consequences of telling that story.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, if you want to help the podcast out, you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/thiswasthescene. I have two tiers, one for $1 a month, one for $3 a month. The $1 a month basically is just your way to support the podcast since you've been listening for a while. The $3 has all the episodes that you can't find on podcast apps. Technically, you can find these episodes on YouTube or my website, but it's just kind of like just too many clicks to get to them. So the reason I like the Patreon is because it's got a cool app. And I organize all the episodes in a tab called Episodes. So it has all of them in order. So when you play one, it's just easy to find the next one and things like that. So if you like simplicity and you want to support the podcast, then go check out the Patreon again. Do the $3 a month if you'd like to. I'm also going to start doing more merch again. I keep saying that all the time, but I'm going to start doing weekly drops. It's the idea. Now I just have to fucking design this shit. So we will see what happens. Kyle Kinane is an American stand-up comedian and actor from Addison, Illinois. Since his debut, he's done a shit ton with Comedy Central and released a bunch of specials. I reached out to Kyle because he grew up in the Chicago punk scene, and I've heard his name mentioned a few times in other podcasts, including Brendan Kelly's Road to the Skeleton Coast. And it just so happened at this time I was already following his Instagram because I thought he was funny as shit, and then his name kept popping up. I was like, oh wow, this guy was in part of the Chicago scene. That'd be awesome to talk to him. So I thought it would be cool to get his perspective on the Chicago scene from back in the day. I asked him to be on the podcast. He said yes, and this is what we chat about. Chris Gethard, Brendan Kelly, Brian Peterson, Nike Park, getting started in comedy, Jawbreaker, Tilt Wheel, getting robbed at gunpoint, and a ton more. Check out his podcast, No Accounting for Taste. There's a link in the show notes for that. And his website, kylekinane.com, has a ton of links to all of his stuff. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started.
You're not going to believe what Kyle Kinane said about Matt Schema. Nor will you care.
Dude, he got like shredded on by people when they launched a clip from their new video. If you just go through their Instagram, it's like, oof, man, people are brutal.
For a while, that one with Steven Caballero.
That new video that they have with zombies and shit.
Yeah, what were they busting on him about?
Someone said like he looks like something like a lesbian or something like that in this one thing. I was like, Jesus Christ, guys.
I mean, that's what happens. Like, listen, as a bald man, you can't save it. You can't either get the fake, go to Bulgaria and get the whole treatment, pay for a quality rug, or just let it go. The comb forward thing, the emo comb forward, is the easiest one to spot. The dude from the Ataris did it. And it's like, bro, you're bald. This is about punk rock's about honesty. And you're trying to push all your hair forward like, oh, I'm still an emo kid. Your hairline starts in the back of your head.
I think he finally shaved it off, Chris from the Ataris. I think he did. I think he just wears a hat now. I saw some, because they just got back together like this past year and toured. On
same guys after fighting?
Yeah, they're over OG guys. I actually interviewed John, who was their guitar player before Chris like fired everybody. And I'll leave this part out, but so the whole point of this podcast is it's about the late 90s punk scene, and I've interviewed bands, producers, managers, just try to get the whole gambit of everyone's perspective of that scene. And I think it was like Brendan Kelly. He had mentioned you years ago on Road to the Skeleton Coast. So I think I was like following you for something because I love comedy. Somehow I remembered I got to your account, and your shit's really fucking good. I don't know.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're like really fucking funny. Not like you need me to fucking tell you, but I was just like looking through some of your shit. It's great.
Still feels nice. It still feels good. Compliments are nice.
So I'm gonna go back and you get involved in the scene stuff, and I definitely want to talk about your comedy career. Just for me personally, I'm just very fascinated about people who get into comedy. I did an interview. Do you know Chris Gethard?
Yeah, Chris is great.
He got connected with me a couple years ago from this guy in the scene. He's like, hey, this guy Chris Gethard wants to talk to you, and I didn't know who he was. So we get on, we start doing the interview, and he's like, yeah, I have this story I wanted to tell you. And he tells this story about back in the late 90s, him and this guy like fucked with my band through this forum. And like we wanted to kick this kid's ass, and we never knew who it was. And then he's like, yeah, it was me. And I'm like, holy shit.
And then knowing that Chris is just like a little sweetheart rascal too. That's great.
Yeah, he has this one part where he's like, yeah, I'm at this show and everyone's like, where's this kid? Is he going to be here? And he's like thinking like, oh my God, what have I done? I'm going to get my ass kicked.
What did he do? I don't not you don't have to rehash the whole story, but what was the thing that got you?
Well, it was cool because he basically was on this forum for like Andy Kaufman back in the day when he was in it. He's a teenager because he really loved that kind of fucking with comedy. Meets this kid who was in Hawaii who didn't have a lot of friends, and the two of them become friends, and then they start kind of fucking with people. And the kid didn't know about the punk scene, so he goes, what is this Legion Hall thing you keep talking to? He goes, well, I go to these local shows in New Jersey. There's this forum, so the kid's like, let me check it out. So this kid finds this picture of this like fat kid in Hawaii from like high school yearbook, photo scans it and puts it up, and then he starts just trolling everyone on this New Jersey punk forum. And like apparently my band was just like very sensitive, so we got really mad and we started fighting back like really hard. But then, then 20 something years later, Chris Gethard comes out and he's like, "Oh, that was me." And he's like, that actually kind of started him on his path to doing comedy, because he was like, "I think I like this." I was like, "Wow, that's crazy."
Yeah, he really came in from a different angle. I don't know the whole lore of. I've done shows with him. I just think he's a great dude, really funny, and like honest and emotional and vulnerable with comedy. Which comedy right now is the opposite of that. So, I think popular comedy is a lot of like, let me tell you why you're doing something wrong, as opposed to let me tell you why I've done things wrong. I like that type of comedy better. That's like, I can't tell you what you're doing with your life, but I can tell you how I screwed some things up, and let me share those stories. I enjoy those. But Gethard just came from like the the Chris Gethard show and cable access, and I just like everything that dude's about. I like what he got himself into there.
Have you guys ever talked about being involved in the scene back in the day?
Oh yeah, we would talk about it. Like when we come into contact with each other, we kind of know a lot of the same people. I always think like just him and Mikey Erg need to do some body switch kind of fun, which I think they probably have. Just need to get Chris Gethard on the playing drums for 19 bands at Fest one year, but he's just really bad. Like, what happened to Mikey Erg, man? Why can't he? Like, I think he finally burnt out. Finally. But yeah, it was just like the same era. Like, this is about late '90s punk. All right, awesome. That's my wheelhouse. Let's do it.
Yeah, dude, I'm fascinated about this because when Brennan mentioned you, didn't you go on his Patreon part of his podcast and talk to him or something?
I did a podcast with him. I did during the pandemic. I hosted the War on Christmas Zoom thing. Shane Torres is actually hosting a live War on Christmas in a couple weeks. I saw Brendan. I was in Chicago last week. He came to the shows I was doing. I started going to see Slapstick in 1993. So that's how I knew Brendan, was from his bands. And then I didn't meet him personally until it was, speaking of Jersey and East Coast, Dan Ozzie. You know Dan?
Yeah, he did. What's the Sellout or something like that?
I did Sellout. He co-wrote Lord Jane Grace's autobiography. And so he was putting shows on. He was doing what was it? Like Punk Hulk or whatever it was on Twitter, back when Twitter was fun.
I did not know that.
And
one.
he was doing like sad punk Hulk or something.
Okay.
And it was a funny account, and I was following it. And then he's like, "Oh, hey, I'm the guy that does that runs that. I'm putting on a show." And he put on a show at Knitting Factory. He had me do comedy, and it was Brendan, and it was Jenny Owen Youngs, and who else? But so that's the first time I met Brendan, was in New York doing that show. I was just like, this is weird, but I've known about you and been a fan of yours for years. Like, I know who you are. I follow comedy and stuff. I'm like, oh, well, then we'll just be friends.
Did you follow his Bad Sandwich Twitter account?
Oh yeah, all the I like Nihilist Arby's.
Yeah,
all that stuff. And that's why I found out. I'm like, oh, you're, I guess not so secretly, this really hilarious guy. I mean, I feel like a sense of humor and clever songwriting kind of go hand in hand. If anything, I'd say the songwriting's more difficult because I could just talk. I don't have to like operate in stanzas or anything.
I met him last tour we did a really long tour with them, and he was just like a wild guy because he had like 20, he was 24 at the time. He definitely was a rough character then, like he, you know, he was kind of, he had a
Yeah.
little bit of an edge to him, but he was really fucking funny, and I obviously just loved him. But I like learned so much about shit from just hanging around this guy, just from his, I don't know, just the way he was like just portraying himself or just saw things, and I was kind of like, oh, I'm kind of a dick. I should probably, you know, take some life lessons from this guy.
He really is. I mean, I know him. Like, I also know the side of him, like just snotty punk rock dude that doesn't have time for dickheads hanging around at bars. Because I
Yeah.
was one of those guys, like back in the day. But I went on tour with. I opened for the Falcons, so I was out in Falcons, him, and it's Dave Hawes and Dan Andriano and Neil Hennessy.
Oh my God.
Between Dave and Brendan, they're incredibly intelligent, like incredibly well read, and like they're referencing like because well they're called the Falcons, so they're called, oh these are Falcon names from medieval like era that we kind of joke around like oh let's call ourselves Xerxes. I'm like I thought we were just gonna be like fart at each other and laugh like oh your level of humor is intellectual like I can't even keep up. I felt like an idiot. Like not like that was on me. They were all fantastic dudes. But you think, you know, you get locked into this no future attitude of punk rock. Like, oh no, we're just gonna drink and party and this is how we live. Hopefully we die before we really embarrass ourselves kind of thing. And then the people from the scene that were secretly getting master's degrees and Daryl from the Bow Weevils was Boll Weevil's canceled a show again. That's lame. Oh, it's because he's doing his residency to become a doctor. Like, oh, wait, what? You can do that? We can all be doing that? I thought we were like tied to this stupid go down with the shit kind of attitude, and that wasn't the case. Secretly, people are like really trying to do well in life and be happy.
Yeah, when they started Lawrence Arms, like him and Chris finished their degrees, so they would tour on the weekends, and then when they were finally done, then they're like, all right, let's do this whole band thing for the next, you know, 20 something years.
Yeah, all this stuff. My parents were like, "Well, it's okay to pursue the arts. You just need to have a plan B." I'm like, "No way! I got to go all or nothing." And then secretly, everybody was getting a plan B lined up, and I didn't know about it. I really can't do anything else. This comedy thing's got to feed me till the end. I don't have something to go back on. Yeah, I thought, oh man, this punk rock thing it doesn't. It's not as comfortable of a jacket in your mid-40s.
Well, how did you get, so that's like a segue, like how did you get involved in the scene? So I want to kind of talk about that and then talk about, you know, you'd mentioned you played shows and then how that leads into your career and just maybe some nostalgia stuff from things you saw back in the day, like shows you went to or like Fireside or playing like going to Legion halls and shit like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I came to punk rock music. It was sonically is what I really enjoyed. I just like the fast music that was not. I guess how do I put it? I would listen to I didn't have older brothers or like I had a cousin and he kind of made me a tape because we both liked BMX, riding BMX. And so if you rode BMX, you listened to Fugazi. I don't know why, but that was just like you were issued 13 songs if you got a BMX bike in the late 80s, early 90s. Well, now you listen to this. And I liked it, but I also didn't, I'm like, I don't know what they're singing about. And it's kind of moody. And I wasn't a moody kid like that. I was definitely more gravitated toward like, let's have a good time. Let's make each other laugh. Let's be silly. So that music, he put out, I remember, I think it was like TSOL was on there. And it was more like, we're going to take down the government. I'm like, I'm 12. Sure. I don't know. I guess how we're going to do that. I don't know. But I liked the way the music sounded. And the two songs that got me going, watching the movie Thrashin'. And because, again, I didn't have people showing me like Search for Animal Chin or actual skate videos. So I watched Thrashin' and it was Wild in the Streets by the Circle Jerks. And I was like, oh, whatever sounds like that, that's what I want to be about. And then it was Plastic Bertrand in National Lampoon's European Vacation when they have to go through the Louvre really fast. And that song played, and I'm like, everything should sound like that. This is great. They're singing in French. I don't know what their lyrics mean anyway, but I want all the music to sound like that. And it was upbeat. It was uplifting too. It was like, oh, this is like fun. Like we're having a good time.
So does that get you involved going to local shows, or does that just get you into record stores and start buying a shit ton of stuff?
So I had my two like touch points of like, okay, this is what I want. I would like to find more music that sounds like this, just guitars, bass, drums, fast. Got to high school, so I started high school in '91. It wasn't the big Green Day pop just yet, but it was all the simmerings that were leading up to it. You'd see the kids. We had a couple like the KMFDM skinny puppy type dudes that were looking real hardcore freaky. We had some of the skateboard kids that were like the punk rock kids, and I just like they were all older kids. I was a dweeb, and I was a freshman. But I'm like, one day. I'm friends with the pretty girls that are freshmen. Like those are just my friends. And these older guys, they want to get to know those pretty girls. So that's my end. I just got to hang out in this group. They're the girls I knew that they liked that stuff too. They were like getting into punk rock and everything. So it really was somebody try. So I remember a girl in like freshman year trying to explain Operation Ivy to me. I'm like, so wait, it's like punk rock. She's like, no, it's kind of like rap. I don't know how to explain it. She didn't know the word ska, and she couldn't explain how they were singing. She's like, it's like rap or something weird. I just like it. I'm like, okay. So seeing that, like driving around with somebody had a Ramones tape in their car, and I just couldn't believe that there's like 35 songs on a cassette. I was like, this is
Yeah, in like 3 minutes.
so got that. Somebody took me to some older girls. Felt bad for me. They took me to a Carter USM, which was more. I think they branched off from EMF, which was like the kind of rave rock scene. So it was still instruments, but it was like light shows and everything. And I went to that, and I went to the cabaret. At the time it was called the Cabaret Metro, and that I was like, oh, look at all these weirdos, and look at the kind of fun people are having. And there was some moshing, but it wasn't violent, and it was just this community of people that I maybe only saw two or three representatives of in my high school. And like, oh, here's everybody all together. I'm like, okay, I need to be around this. Oh, watch out, buddy. Sorry, I'm sitting in my van watching a guy with a bulldozer almost take out a Hyundai Accent. All right.
Okay. Jeez.
Sorry, I'm easily distracted. There's about a busy street. The power's out in my house. I got to sit in a van. So that got me. I mean, what everybody says, probably just the energy and the community of people, strangers sweating all over each other. If you fall down, somebody picks you up, pats you on the back, and shoves you back in, and looking out for each other though. And it was just so energizing and so refreshing I didn't really have the teen angst, but I wasn't sports, and I was decent at school, but I didn't really care to try that much. Good grades came easy, and when they didn't, I did terrible. I didn't want to challenge myself. I think I had a really good sense of knowing that youth gets wasted on the young, and I'm not going to have those days forever. Even looking back at 46, I think I really took advantage of having the best possible time I could have going to shows.
How did you see that though? Like as a kid, did you pay attention to older like older teenagers and just learn lessons from that? Like what made you do that?
I think in no way were we emotionally or intellectually mature for our age. That wasn't it at all. But I think seeing so how I really started going to shows. One of the skateboard kids, he tells me, he's like, hey, what are you doing? I know exactly. It was Valentine's Day of 1993. It was a Sunday night, and I had to convince my mom because I tried to go. I was going to go see the Ramones with Social Distortion, and I think I was like a freshman in high school, and it was on Halloween. It was going to be on Halloween as a freshman. Some of the older kids were like, we're all going to do this. My mom's like, absolutely not. Sophomore year, it's 1990. The skateboard kid is like, we're going to go see this show. Because he had played No Effects in the car for me, and that when I heard it was the White Trash, Two Heaves and a Bean. And so hearing that for the first time, we're like, oh, they're being silly, but this music is what I want it to sound like. But they're singing about lesbians. Oh, they're singing, you can't play the song on the radio, but then they're swearing, so the song can't be played on the radio. This is hilarious. 15, you're an idiot. So that kid that played that, he's like, we're going to go to the show. And it was McGregor's, which was a legendary spot in Villa Park, so it was easy to go. It wasn't in the city. I grew up in the suburbs. It wasn't in Chicago. It was literally 5 minutes from my house. And this is like This is where Nirvana played when they were coming through and starting out. This is like the spot. And so the show was Screeching Weasel, Smoking Popes, Vindictives, and Boll Weevils, I think was the lineup. And it was the last show McGregor's going to have. And so we pull into the parking lot, and it's packed. I mean, there's hundreds of people there. It's a little bar show. They sell out the first show immediately. You know, you couldn't buy tickets in advance for this kind of thing. It just sold out. Screeching Weasel agrees to play the second show, like play another show. The other bands weren't going to play it, so they'll just add a late show. And so we're all waiting out so we can get in the second show. We're freezing our asses off. But I'm seeing, everybody. It's like mohawks, leather jackets, and like all those kind of people. Like, what are they doing at Villa Park? I've never seen any of these people walking around. They all came to Villa Park, and it was one of those realizations. Oh, this band isn't on the radio. They don't have music videos. How does everybody know about this? And the doors opened. I'm sorry if I get a little too corny about it, but
No, man.
It was such a formidable memory for me.
Yeah, dude. No, that's the point of this whole thing. It's just like really.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're already being nostalgic, you may as well be corny while you're doing it.
Yeah, man. Go for it.
So we're waiting in line. So this first show's going, and the doors open. And I remember specifically the doors open. Somebody was just leaving during the first show, and it was the guitar solo to Supermarket Fantasy. And I just heard it was like one of those cinematic moments where you hear that part, you just get that glimpse of it, that audio glimpse of like, wait, what? That's going on in there? Yeah, I'll freeze my ass off. I got to see what's happening. So we wait. We go to the second show. And it was wild. I bought Boogada Boogada Boogada. I was able to learn those songs on guitar by the end of the week. Before I'm like trying to play Guns N' Roses. I'm like, why did I buy a guitar? This was stupid. And then Screeching Weasel, I'm like, I can play these songs, which I've since now I know Jughead. I tell that story. He's like, yeah, but some of that stuff was a little complicated. I'm like, yeah, but it's not. You're not Steve Vai. I could figure out a Screeching Weasel guitar solo. I'm not figuring out an Yngwie Malmsteen scoop neck strat arpeggiated whatever the fuck he's playing. But I can this finger goes, I don't even need to use my pinky. All right, I can get this stuff down.
So you were trying to play guitar at this point, and that led you to doing
that? Yeah. I just always slap of my girlfriend's like, I was real good about asking me weird questions. She's like, what's one thing you wish you could do? And I was like, shred on guitar. She's like, if you could, I would leave you. She's like, if you were that guy, I would not be able to be around you. I'm like, well, you're lucky because I can't do it at all. And still to this day, though, I don't know, maybe I'd sacrifice my relationship to be able to shred.
So this leads to you, because you said you played in a band. Like, how soon after you started going to shows did that happen?
So that Screeching Weasel show, that started you walk out and you see everybody handing out the flyers. And this is how you find out about what you're doing next weekend, is you snatch up all these flyers. I couldn't get enough flyers to find out what the next shows were. So that was almost every weekend in high school. If there were shows, I was trying to get a ride to those shows or trying to borrow a car somehow to get to shows. Seeing it being done by people my age, like seeing somebody that's 16 or 17 years old get a band together, I'm like, it can be done. I only knew MTV. I only saw these dolled up versions or, professional manufactured ideas of bands. It's like, how does that start anywhere? But the punk rock thing is like, it starts right here. You meet people at the show. You play bass, you play guitar. Okay, cool, let's get it together. I was messing around with a couple pals. Everybody's got their little their 1, 3, 5 chords going. We wound up kind of messing around. It was two other guys from high school. They're older. We just started playing. We were playing with my buddy's brother was on drums for a minute. Then we got this other, you play with bands, and then that drummer's looking for a band. We got him in the band, and that was it. We practiced on my parents' house Thursdays and Sundays.
What was the name of the band?
The Grand Marquis.
Like, what kind of shows did you guys play? Did you play more out in the suburbs and like Legion halls and things like that, or did you actually get to play at Fireside?
Yeah, we'd play Fireside. It's funny because Brian Peterson, who booked the Fireside, he was always like this giant bearded dude that was so intimidating. You'd go down there. Shows are $5. All right, I got just enough money to get in. Show's $6. You're like, Brian, I thought it was $5. I have a $5 bill. I'm so scared to ask, but can you just? And you'd be so terrified. But it's fine because I talked to him now. He's like, it's weird because I would book the band. I was the one that would call the hotline. He's like, you're always so quiet back in the day. It's weird that you're a comedian. I'm like, yeah, you scared the shit out of everybody. But so we would play there. We never played the big shows. A lot of shows were out in Elgin, so that was kind of 30 or 40 miles outside of the city. So that kind of was really a good hub for all the suburban folks or people that live further out in the boonies. We go to Elgin, so that was I would see a bunch of shows at the third floor out there.
Yeah, people have talked about that before on this. They've talked about Elgin.
Yeah, Elgin had its own scene going on. This place called the Third Floor, and it was like a third floor of an old office building that was not built to accommodate the number of people that they put in there. And I remember one show. It might have been slapstick, and so there's like every song's got a breakdown where everybody starts jumping around. And I found like a support pylon to stand next to because I'm like, this floor is going to give out. I found a beam to hold on to just in case.
Did you go to actually that made me think about this. Did you go to that slapstick reunion show that they had to raise the money for that kid?
Yeah, that was like 97 maybe.
Something like that, yeah.
I believe I did. I believe it was daytime at the fireside. I think I got over to that one.
That was like what would that? That was like an urban legend for so long. Everyone was like, "There's this." They did this because it was like Dan's sister. It needs like to get away from the city, but it turned out to be Brendan's roommate at the time. It's like his family had like a gang that was trying to kill them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so they did that, and he just gave him the money. He's like, I can't give this back to anybody, and the kid was like, oh, and he got his like mom and sisters like out of the area they were living in, because I guess like the little kids saw these gang guys like kill someone or something wild like that.
Oh, and I don't think that's how it was even. I mean, they didn't have to bill it as anything to get people to come to it, but oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what that whole show was about. They just raised all that money. It was like thousands of dollars, and they just gave it to him. Yeah, he talked about it. I was like, well, that's wild.
And that's what, to go back to that thing about realizing that I'm not going to say like, oh, they were going to be the best years of my life. I'm not going to go Bryan Adams on you, but knowing that, oh, we're in Chicago, we have access to this major city that tons of bands are playing, always coming through, and the shows, I think the audiences would reward those bands for being great audiences and being really enthusiastic, and kind of knowing but not really knowing that like, oh, this is a once in a lifetime thing, that this is happening now while I'm in high school and these bands are blowing up. Because on Green Day, I went and saw, Green Day was opening for Bad Religion, and I went and saw that show. And then the next year is when Dookie came out, and it did kind of, it's so silly how territorial people got, like punk rock accepts everybody, and you'd be like, why is that guy here? It's so much gatekeeping for how much proselytizing, like, oh, it's accepting. It's okay if you're queer, but don't be on the soccer team and show up at a show, because then we'll have to be an asshole to you.
Some would say that too. They're like, if for such an accepting or like rule breaking thing, there were so many fucking rules to be in the punk scene.
It really was. I mean, that was like before Ben Weasel became what we know of him now. He really kind of dug his heels into being like satirically a gatekeeper. Like, you absolutely, like that, and like Maximum Rock and Roll columns, like, well, you have to wear Chuck Taylors, you have to have a leather jacket. If you don't, I just won't take you seriously. Like, oh, it's real funny.
What was your style back then? Were you doing like the Jinko jeans and
Oh yeah, man, yeah, it was that until I so desperately wanted to be Mike Ness. I'm surprised I never broke an ankle trying to copy that jump from the cover of Somewhere Between Heaven and Hell. I try to jump with my guitar like that at least 19 times a show, I think.
What were like some of the labels that you followed, like the sound around that period, like the mid-late 90s, were you like paying attention to?
It was at that point, Lookout Records, anything that was coming out on Lookout, because that was still the era. The internet was around, but I wasn't savvy, so I didn't know how to navigate that to find any new music. So it was, you would look at what the bands they would thank in their liner notes. And it was Epitaph. Epitaph was it wasn't quite as expansive at that point, because like I think they were really getting into all kinds of stuff. Like, I fall off around, like, once I started doing comedy, I kind of really fell off what bands I was aware of. So Epitaph was still, it was your Pennywise and stuff, but it was like a lot of flat brim hat kids punching at dads that aren't there, in the mosh pit. I'm like, oh, this isn't fun. You guys all need a hug. I don't want to go. This pit is not nice.
Was there like any pivotal shows that you went to? And I want to talk about like how you got in comedy and stuff too, because I'm just fascinated, like I said. But do you remember any pivotal shows that you went to at like the Metro or Fireside or like Arlington Heights?
Yeah, it was Arlington Heights VFW. It was, and I'll also say it was like there was that was the onslaught of like the Warp Tour before it was like super rapey, or at least knowingly super rapey.
Yeah.
But so I remember getting like an Honest Don's comp from there and hearing, I think I heard Chicks Dig It. I fucking love that band so much. That is one of the ones, still put it on to just cheer me up. And that was one of the rare punk shows I saw at Lounge Acts was Chicks Dig It.
Where was that?
That was in Lincoln Park. It didn't, so Lounge Acts was like a legendary spot. This is how much of a goober I am. That I would always check the listings in the Chicago Reader to see what shows and who was having one. I always like glance at Lounge Acts to see. I was dabbling in rockabilly because we all make mistakes, and so I was kind of dabbling in rockabilly for a minute. So I'd seen a couple shows there, but I'm like, why is it like there's so many great bands in this city, but why every Thursday? Who's Wilco? Why do they get to play every Thursday? So Wilco just playing in like a bar every Thursday night, and I could have seen them at that stage.
Wow.
Instead, I'm like, man, why are you guys booking the Meshuggahs? Why are you booking this band that gets drunk and won't tune their instruments? Oh, Wilco, sure.
Did you like kind of like the transition you do in comedy? Did you always like from playing in a band, did you kind of decide, all right, the band thing is going to work, but I like being in front of people, and then you tried the comedy thing, or was this happening while you were in the band?
Well, I think I was, the band was kind of dwindling out because I just don't think we had I mean, like for a couple of us, our musical capabilities were very limited. The drummer and the bass player are still going and still playing in bands as they should. They're still really talented. I always liked watching comedy on TV. Again, this is one of those things where it's like I don't know where it starts though. You'd watch the Sunday Funnies or Evening at the Improv, and you'd see comedy on television. I started watching the Tonight Show when I was a little kid because I had afternoon kindergarten, so my mom is a night person. She let me stay up late and watch Johnny Carson, and I couldn't understand. Like, they'll go, okay, that guy's a sports star. That's a movie star. But then at the end, they'd have a comedian. I'm like, that guy just talked. All they got to do is walk out there and they just say some things, and that's the job. Like, well,
Just
all
that
right.
easy.
That is, yeah. I'm like, wow, talk about streamlining. I'm here. I'm going to talk for a bit. Give me $1 million. I'm like, all right. But just that idea, there wasn't a movie. There's no production about it. That's the form of entertainment. Is they're just going to be funny. Again, when you're a kid, I didn't know what comedy clubs were. I don't know where you go to see that stuff. Oddly enough, there's a comedy club. I'll get real weird about this. I've told this story before, but across from McGregor's, where I saw Screeching Weasel, there was a comedy club back in the 80s. And it was, again, I'm driving by with my parents. I'm like, what is that place? And it's like, oh, people go in there to laugh. I'm like, what a stupid building. They didn't explain to me like the art of stand-up comedy or why it happens. Like, oh, people just go in there and they laugh at stuff. Like, okay, that's fucking weird. But that intersection, I don't know if this part's true or not, but my uncle worked for the fire department. I remember him saying one time they found old maps from the Cold War, statements about the Chicagoland area. And during the Cold War, that intersection, Route 83 North Avenue, that would be ground zero for a nuclear missile to hit the Chicagoland area because. And this is wild. There's somebody did the math and had to think, well, if the missile lands in Chicago, a lot of the blast will go out over the lake, and that's such wasted potential. So the population center where it could create the most damage would be at 83 North Avenue, which happens to be where there's a comedy club and a punk venue. Mile from my house growing up. But it makes sense because then Addison, I'm from a town called Addison, and there's a place there now called Nike Park. And that was because that was a Nike missile site, and the Nike missiles are anti-nuke missiles. So it is believable from that standpoint.
Jesus.
Yeah, so that's pretty fun to know.
I'm looking this up on Google Maps right now. Yeah, Nike
Yeah,
Park.
look up Nike Park will be off. I believe it's off Rowling Road, Road 53. But I have yet to been able to find any information about that being ground zero, or maybe that is what our U.S. defense system predicted would be the strike area. So that's why they put the Nike missiles. But we would go drink on these train tracks that just dead ended because that was where they would deliver the Nike missiles to the park. So we just go hang out on those train tracks.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's fucking scary.
Uh, but so okay, yeah. So I mean,
Little history lesson, kids.
that's the 50s. Well, I guess no, the Cold War went well up into the 80s. I remember I watched the fall of the Berlin Wall. I think on a TV at a J.C. Penney's. It was one of those. I'm sorry, I'm just going off on shit.
Real quick, if you want to support the podcast, you can check out my new $3 tier over at patreon.com/thiswasthescene. I have all the episodes that you cannot find on podcast apps because podcast apps only hold the current 100 episodes. So check it out again at patreon.com/thiswasthescene. There's also a link to the show notes. And now back to the episode. There's a podcast out there. It's about the Berlin Wall coming down. It's actually, no, it's about Wind of Change by the Scorpions.
Yes.
Did you listen to this podcast?
Yeah, and about how they think that they were paid by the CIA to create that song.
Yes. It is fucking what? Like, we don't want to spoil for anybody because I'm not going to say what happens at the end, but it is totally fucking worth the listen, I think.
Yeah, and especially because it was like Monsters of Rock that they played it, and it's about all the other bands just being absolutely shit faced on the airplanes going over there. That was a good. It's a conspiracy, but it's like harmless.
Yeah,
which is nice for one of those for a conspiracy theory to have no victims in it. It's a nice listen.
Okay, so when you I really am just fascinated, also fascinated about like the comedy thing, and then like what got you on stage the first time? And are you cool with like me kind of digging into the whole comedy career too?
No, let's go for it. Sometimes I feel bad if I know I've told this story elsewhere, but there's a new audience. I feel like, oh, Grandpa's telling us war stories again.
Yeah, but also from a guy who had to get up and do the same material over and over and over again. Like, I mean, you had to get over that too, right?
Yeah, I still get pretty bored with myself in that sense. That leads to some pretty bad shows where I'm like, I just want to tell something else. So right about the time the band was, speaking of other podcasts, I was listening to the Chris DeMakes a podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, and he was interviewing as the bass player from the Descendants, and they were both talking about how band practice was like the most fun you would have. Like that's what you look forward to all week was band practice, and that's how it was for us. Like we had more fun practicing, and if there was a show, we're like, we gotta carry all this stuff up the stairs.
Yeah.
Get it in the car, and we gotta set it up. Like we had more fun. Like, oh, it's practice. All right, we're hanging out. We're having a good time. I think it just kind of dissipated like most bands do if you're not professional and career minded about it. Like you really underestimate how professional you have to be if you want to make it a go, even as a mid-level or any kind of band, about how serious about getting better at playing, taking care of your voice, practicing on your own when you're not just playing in the band, like to improve. And that's so antithetical to all the punk rock stuff. It's like, no, man, you just throw it together and play, which much like everybody getting their degrees, all these bands that look sloppy, but then they start playing and they know what they're doing. They can get drunk because they know the songs inside and out. We were not that band. And I think, who starts dating, who's got to finish school, these things all started coming up. So the band was starting to dwindle a little bit. I was dead ending myself. I think I was delivering pizzas and I was working at a gas station. I was on, I think, college number 2 out of 3 that I went to at that point. Or no, I think I was finally on to college number 3. I would read the newspapers at the gas station every morning. And in one of them, they're like, oh, we're doing an open casting call for the HBO Comedy Arts Festival in Aspen. So any comedians come and sign up. And I'm like, oh, so this is how you start comedy. Because I didn't know about open mics. I conveniently didn't read that part of the Chicago Reader when I was looking for bands. I didn't look at the comedy part. I just thought it was like Second City. I thought you went and did sketch comedy, and you're like, okay, I'm an octopus bartender. Here we go. I just thought that's what comedy was because I didn't know where you did stand up at. And so I went to Zanies. I went downtown to Zanies to do it in the middle of the day. There's like 100 some comics all getting 3 minutes to impress these people from HBO. And I went up. I was going to school for writing, and I was writing down ideas. All the stories I would read in class, I was trying to get laughs. I was trying to like have them be entertaining because I wasn't a sad person. But fuck, you take a fiction writing class in college, and it's a checklist of like, okay, here's the goth kid going through his H.P. Lovecraft stage.
Here's dragons.
Here's fantasy cat ears lady. Here's 3 new lesbians that are gonna, express about how they found themselves. But everybody deserves that time to be there. It's college, but it's everybody being brand new, and I'm just being a dickhead and I'm like, right. So this weekend I went to a party and this crazy thing happened. Like those are the stories I'm writing. I'm basically, I don't even realize that I'm writing stand-up bits, and everybody hates me because I'm not taking fiction writing seriously, because I'm not crying while I'm reading my thing. I'm not trying to make somebody else cry with my stuff. I'm just trying to like bring a little levity to these. He's like 20 years old and feeling all the emotions in the world. That I'm like, oh, these are funny. I'll go tell them at this weird open mic thing. I don't even remember how I did. I think I just the physical act of like, oh, this is what walking on stage and holding a microphone with no musical instruments around and no friends up there to just see if there's laughs in this. Great, I did it. I felt like, okay, I checked that off my list of things I wanted to try in life. Now I'm back to working as a cashier at a gas station. So then I'm at Columbia College in Chicago, and I'm taking, one of my class, it was like a poetry class or something. And one of the guys in there was one of the comics that I saw him at that show. And I go, hey, I think I saw you do stand-up at this thing. And he goes, oh, yeah. He's like, if you want to do stand-up, you go to open mic. It broke it down for me. His name's Johnny Berger. He's still in Chicago. He's a filmmaker, runs Jake's Pizza, great pizza over in Schiller Park, I think he's at. But you plug your friends when you can plug your friends.
Absolutely, you got to.
So he tells me about open mics, and so I watched open mics for 3 months. Like I respected comedy and was afraid of it, so I watched it for a summer. I think in 1999 is when I started, and I went to the Lions Den, or no, it wasn't Lions Den. It was the Red Lion on Lincoln. Actually, probably about a block away from Lounge X. And I went and watched comedy for, like I said, about 3 months. It was Thursday nights. The band had kind of imploded at that point, and I had no creative outlet. And it's so weird to want to do comedy in the middle of punk rock, because punk rock is all about like not worrying what people think about you, and especially not trying to be a clown. Like everybody was funny. That was what I liked about seeing shows in Chicago. Nobody took themselves too seriously. Like you see so many shows where, every song has a message. This one's about free Tibet. I'm like, that's great, but also, come on, man. I'm here to get a smile on my face. I mean, I want Tibet to be free, but can we take it easy? We're all 18 years old here. Yeah, I'm not trying to take that away from them, but you see some bands that like it is the message and it's serious, and my girlfriend, I went saw Bad Religion a few years ago. She's like, I just feel like it's my dad yelling at me because I don't know about current events. I'm like, yeah, it do be like that. Chicago, most of the band, there was still some seriousness, some music that was, had, more serious messages, but they were a good time. Those shows were fun and people laughed, and it wasn't just rock stuff, people laughing because, oh, the musician made us silly. Like, no, Brendan Kelly's legitimately a funny and entertaining guy to listen to. The Meshuggahs, like, I have comedy heroes, but I also look up to bands that I have to compare. Am I being as funny? And they were still like, Meshuggahs rip as a band, but then I remember it was like Joe Meshuggah, and then I think just to make fun of punk rock names, the guitar player was just named Craig Anarchy. And that killed me from the get-go, because I remember like the band last name thing, like, I don't know, I guess my name's Craig Anarchy or some shit. And I remember Joe Meshuggah trying to tune his guitar, and he just gets frustrated. He goes, ah, fuck it, I already got your money. And they just played, and it sounded like shit. And I thought that was hilarious. And that was the standard for comedy I had. And now I'm going to go write jokes and do it on purpose. So I didn't tell anybody I was doing stand up. I went and sat by myself like a creep and watched an open mic for 3 months.
When you're doing that though, are you like, because sometimes open mic can be cringy if they don't get a laugh. Like, did that kind of dissuade you a little bit from wanting to go back, or did that not affect you?
No, that's why the guys that were good, I was like, well, I'm not going to be that good, but it was the guys that were bad, the guys that would get no laughs but would come back every week. Those were the heroes to me because I'm not being bothered by it. Like, if this guy can come back every week and get no laughs, I can at least do that too.
Mm.
And nobody was a jerk to him. I mean, I didn't know the inside politics of it. I'm sure just with the same thing with bands, like, oh, this band got booked again. They suck, but they're reliable and they bring people out. So I kind of thought, like, well, if I can be better than the worst person, that's all I need to start with. I'm not competitive. Wasn't raised with sports or like this competitive nature. So I'm not like, I'm going to dominate comedy. I was just like, I think I could be better than the shittiest guy doing it.
That's a good point.
And that's good enough for me.
I feel like that was like kind of like a thing with bands too. It's like you'd go to shows. I think some kids who went to the shows before they were in a band, they might have been like the same thing, like, okay, we're not gonna be as good as Newfound Glory and as Legion Hall, but like this other band, they kind of suck, and we can maybe just get a little bit above them. We might have a chance.
There was a band, and I can't remember their name, and it's probably for the best. And I think Brian Peterson booked them only because he knew they'd implode on stage every time. And I think he needed it for him. All right, and they would get like good bookings. And they were all in high school, and they would just fight each other on stage. And everybody's there like, how the fuck did like these other bands, everybody in the scene is in a band in some way. Like, it's like how podcasts are now. Everybody had a band.
Yeah.
Whether you heard it about it or not, everybody had a band, just like everybody's got a podcast. And so I think I remember seeing them sitting in back like, this band rules. And it's just these kids like, fuck you, fucking play it in C. Playing it, I don't know where C is. Which fret is C? They're fighting each other on stage. And I think he did that just for himself, just because that was his little Andy Kaufman. I'm like, I'm going to book these guys and watch them fall apart in front of 300 people.
I feel like this sounds like, do you remember the band Latex Generation?
I can't say I know them well, but I know that name.
Okay, it just sounds like that they had this one drummer named Alien, and there was like one show where the drummer's playing, and he dropped a stick, and he got up mid song and went to go pick it up, and like the singer was like, "Fuck this," and like just like beat the shit out of him.
I mean, much like comedy, when it's going great, it's great, but when it's going really, really bad, it's also something pretty special to witness.
I find it so cringy. It's like so hard to watch. Like, a bad band is one thing, but like when someone's up there bombing and no one's laughing, it's so difficult to like take that in.
I mean, I'll go to open mics. I like seeing, like, I went to an open mic last night and I see my friends that are working on stuff, and you know that they know the structure. So if it doesn't get laughs, it's not bad. It's like, oh, I had to say these words in this order into a microphone to get the wheels rolling. You can't rehearse stand up. It can't begin in a vacuum. It has to be done in front of people, which that's a terrifying aspect. You can't hold a hairbrush in the mirror and figure it out. You've got to go in front of strangers and get kicked in the ass a bunch of times. But it was good. It's an open mic, so I'm not there being harsh about it, but there's people that are good. There's people that it's their first time, and great, good for you for having the courage to do that. And then there's people, it's also open mic. Anybody in the world can sign up and have a crowd listen to them for 5 minutes. And that is very attractive to a lot of weird people.
Do they get like, I mean, because your name's out there. When you show up to a club, do people know who you are and then feel a little intimidated when they get on stage? Be like, oh, this guy does this professionally, like shit.
I mean, but that's not, yeah, maybe I kind of roll into the back and just hang out. I mean, LA or New York, nobody gives a shit in the first place because that's what people live there. I live in Portland now, and I kind of, you live here long enough. People are like, oh yeah, this comedian lives here, so I'm like, yeah, I got to try stuff, and I'm gonna bomb. But for the most part, the open mics are filled with mostly comics that are around, so I kind of know everybody. So I don't think so. I hope not. I hope people realize the reason I go to open mics is because, yeah, I started here. I didn't perform. I went to hang out, but occasionally I'll go up and I'll do bad because I treat it like an open mic. All right, here's new, untested material. I'm not going to go do something that I know works. That's not what the open mic is for.
In the beginning, was it a bit of a dissuasive thing where you maybe went up a couple times and didn't get any laughs? Were you kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this, or did that make you want to do it more?
I think it was a mix. We're getting really psychoanalytical about it. I was still like the guy looking back. I mean, you want to talk about cringy and looking back on stuff. Like, oh man, I really thought I was the funniest person at every party, but I was just the loudest.
Mm.
I was like, oh, everybody's listening to me. Yeah, because I'm not letting anybody else talk. And look back on those times, like, oh yeah, I was drunk and I was loud, and everybody was. Again, punk rock. Who could be the most obnoxious, craziest person? I mean, Fat Mike's still stuck in that personality. Can you believe I made this lady wear a saddle? Come on, dude.
Wait, what was this?
I don't know. Doesn't he make ladies dress like horses or something?
I don't know. I thought I mean, he's definitely an S&M from talking about it.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Every time I see Fat Mike, he seems like he's like, "Can you believe I'm doing this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man. It's not like nothing's crazy anymore." I hate saying it. The craziest, most Ben Weasel is what is contrarian. If you're trying to freak people out, it's Ben Weasel being who he is now, being this asshole. Like that is contrarian. Oh my god, that dude almost. I'm watching so much weird construction stuff happen. I watched a car almost get impaled by a 2x4. I am on a very busy corner right now. All right, sorry, distracted. Um, but to go, yeah. What was the?
When you get up and you bomb a bunch of times, or no one's laughing, or whatever the thing is, and it's like, did that dissuade you, or did that kind of add fuel to the fire? Where you're like, you know what, I really want to fucking do this now.
The first time I went up, I didn't do bad, and I think it came from. Oh, that's what I was saying. So the performative aspect of like probably just needing attention. So that's where being in a band, like not just attention for attention's sake, but attention for doing something well. If it's music, or if it was like, oh, people are laughing at me, I'm being actually funny. I'm not just acting out, trying to get kicked out of class. So that combined with trying to make that into a creative writing angle, I think mixing those together, like, okay, this is how to structure an idea into a joke, as opposed to just walking up there and be like, guys, isn't it crazy? Like when this thing happens. So that gave me some structure to it. And then being a loud, obnoxious guy trying to be funny helped with the humor part.
Did you kind of, like you said before, you like to turn inward and stuff, like when you were in the band, because were you writing any of the songs or lyrics at all, or were you just playing guitar?
Not lyrics. God forbid we ever recorded stuff and the lyrics got written that day. This was not a band where like, oh, I have an emotion that I need to express, and the song it was us going, all right, now put your hand here on the guitar, but then go here, but then go back real quick, and then go up three things, go to this dot, and then down here. That sounds cool, right? And then the drummer would just speed that up to a point where it was unlistenable, and that was our band.
Because I was wondering if there was some reason where if your lyrics were shit and you're like, I kind of want to have something that's more meaningful. So I'm just trying to think of it, just kind of see if there's this bridge between the band and if you
No.
hadn't done it. Yeah, it was just something you were doing to be creative. So you just needed a creative outlet and you're going, okay, then on to the next thing.
Yeah, I had a real need to just make something. I was into just drawing and sketching as a kid. Just always some sort of output, but it never made it past the doodling. Everything was doodling and noodling. I never raised the bar for myself on anything except stand up.
Why? Why though?
I don't, maybe it's because there's consequences. Like there's no consequence to like, oh, this song doesn't sound good at practice. We'll scrap it and start another one. Or, oh, I'm drawing this thing, or I don't like it, I'm just going to give up on it. With stand up, if it sucked, like, oh man, you feel filthy. when nobody laughs, especially because I was driving from the suburbs. I'd drive 35, 45 minutes to just go wait and do an open mic for 5 minutes. That added something like, oh, I better make this worth it. For I'm going to go and work my 2 jobs or have like part-time college and then still try and get down to the city to do this open mic. And I would have the whole ride home to feel awful if I bombed. And then if you bomb, you want to go out and do it again because you want to wash that feeling off. So I'm like, oh, I had a crummy show. I better sign up for an open mic tomorrow so I don't feel like this way. And I'll try hard. Hopefully I learn from my mistakes. And it was the one thing that I wanted to keep fine tuning, keep tinkering with.
I was watching Hot Ones yesterday, and he was talking to Sebastian Milscott, whatever. He was like, do you put yourself into situations just to kind of get material? Do you find like you used to do that or do that now?
He's from Arlington Heights, Sebastian. Yeah, he's from a couple towns over. From the same town as a Guitar Center where I got my first guitar from. It's funny, I was referencing it in some newer material about how I used to look at everything as like this sort of mistake journalism. Like, oh, I should go out and do this, get into this scenario. But I would never get into it with the hopes of turning it into comedy. It was just more, let's have this be an organic experience. But you could take some mental notes as to like, oh, that is a funny thing that happened there. But I don't want to cheat myself out of living. I don't want to just go into everything and be like, oh, let me make it crazy. Like, you see those people, that's what TikTok is for, is people capitalizing their every waking moment for content. And that's not how I want to do it. I'd rather live my life how I want to live it. And if the way I interpret it or something happens is funny, then I can come back and do it. I think that's how I would hope. Like, I think that's a sign of a good comic, is that nothing crazy has to happen for them to tell you, the old adage, oh, that guy could read a phone book and funny. But it's also, oh, somebody can go to a grocery store and it'll be funny for him. Nate Bargatze is not living like one of the members of Jackass, and he's a clean comic, and he's one of the funniest guys out there just because his hot water heater went out or something.
I didn't even know who that guy was until his face started popping up, and I'm like, I gotta check this guy out. And I was like, holy shit, he is really fucking funny.
Great, family friendly, clean, but dude has enough skills to just make whatever's going on. He's got his point of view, he's got his voice, and it's great.
Where in Portland do you live? Actually, I used to live there a couple of years ago.
I'm in like a little sleepy neighborhood. Again, what kind? Do I need to be living this life where like, oh, I got to be in a bar and then this crazy thing happened, which I still have those stories. They still happen to me. But also, I should be able to make a funny story about how I tried to cook dinner and screwed it up. That should be the skill set that you have as a comedian, is you can retell any happening in a funny way, find the humor in any situation, as opposed to being like, I'm not trying to be a Vice journalist just for bits,
I mean, do you write all this shit down in like your phone, or you just like kind of like Jay-Z, just it's all from memory?
No, my memory's dog shit. I got to write down notes. Even the notes don't make sense if they're not detailed enough. So no, it's all little snippets, or I'll write down. I think language is a pretty fun part of comedy. Of like, there's so many words you could use to describe one thing. You could just say lugubrious instead of what lugubrious means. I don't know what it means. I was just trying to think of a good, smart word.
Is that even a word?
I'm pretty sure it is. And I'm going to go look it up because I'm like, I would like to use that word in a joke. Because that's how I feel about it. I'm like, I would like a word of a day calendar. Like, I would like to use that word in a joke because it's a fun word to use.
You heard it here first, everybody.
You see me throwing lugubrious out. Know that we both just figured that out on November 28th. 2023. I didn't keep that one from the spelling bee in 5th grade. I'm learning it now. I write jokes the same way Greg Graffin writes Bad Religion songs, except mine are funny. But you still have to look up some of the words.
That's also another great book if you get a chance to listen to that one.
Which one?
Do What You Want.
What is that?
It's Bad Religion's like biography.
Oh, okay.
Do you still listen to like any bands from back in the day, like now?
I almost only listen to band. I went and saw Pegboy in New York like 3 weeks ago. I'm going to Chicago just for a night this weekend to see Sludgeworth and Smoking Popes. I realized somebody else was saying like, oh, I go see more bands now than I ever have. I'm like, yeah, I think knowing that they probably won't be around for much longer or willing to play shows. So I'm like, let me go see him. And happy to report, Pegboy was phenomenal. That was, I mean, you talk about like what like the crossover of seeing Larry just. There's some like emotional lyrics in Pegboy songs, but then Larry's like he's dry heaving but smiling between the songs. Like the guy loves doing that. He still loves it. And that like, oh, you still have enthusiasm for this and you're happy to do this show for the people watching. Like I want to retain that. I want to retain there's this kind of like a sad element to the songs, but Larry's funny ways. He's like, this is my favorite Pegboy song. It's about quitting. Like, you're making me laugh, but also I can tell like, are you gonna kill yourself? I hope you don't. I really like your music, and you're smiling right now. But man, you keep making hints that you are unhappy.
Yeah, I saw them years ago. They opened when it was like Face to Face in 2009 or 10. They were on tour, and they brought along Pegboy. That dude was the happiest guy on stage. He was just like they hadn't played in forever, and he was just like he like got on the floor in front of the barricade and was just like slapping everyone's hands like for the
Yep,
entire set.
yep, and belts it out, and then dry heaves between the songs. This song kept me from killing myself. It's just a cheap trick cover.
I remember seeing that because I follow your account with my personal account, and I saw that come up, and it's like I'm going through now. You got fucking 88 Fingers Louie is commenting, got Jawbreaker is commenting on this
Yeah,
shit. Is that wild to you?
it was the Jawbreaker stuff. It was Adam Fowler. He ran the Lost Coast video. He ran a video store in San Francisco that was having comedy shows for a while. And I didn't know it was him. I just heard like in the Bay Area, like, oh, this video store has comedy shows. It's owned by like a guy from some band. I'm like, oh, what's the band? Like, oh, like Jawbreaker. I'm like, wait, what? And so he was having comedians open. I was roasting him when I did that because it was the Dear You tour. And I know like it's a Dear You is a divisive album. And if anything I've said over the last hour about just wanting to have a good time, I was not a Dear You fan. I was like, so I was opening the show. I was like, it's great to hear, great to be here for this album that was made specifically for kids who cut themselves after their parents got divorced, which might have been a bit much. So like, yeah, man, like everybody's watching them play Dear You, and I'm like, everybody in here is just sad right now. Why are we even at a concert? Why did I leave the house? I can stay home and be sad.
Yeah, I couldn't get it. Even now, like listen to it. There's a couple songs like I'm just like it's just not. I mean, I obviously the respect for it, but I'm like I just never been able to sit down and listen to that record all the way through.
It's with age you realize to be able to say something. I know that it's good. It's not for me. But God, I'd love a new Chicks Dig It album. I'll tell you that much. That band, I saw them about a year ago. Oh, they fucking rip.
I know that name very well. I think I've heard a couple songs. I just never like just got into them or never just gave their records like a full spin.
I mean, that's the exact kind of music, but like songs like Henry Rollins is no fun, stuff like that. I remember seeing them at Awesome Fest in San Diego. At time like, in which ways is punk rock like anti-societal, or they just kept love bombing the crowd and to a point of annoyance. Like they wouldn't play. They're like, "You guys are great. It's so great to be back in San Diego. All right, hey, give it up for the drummer. All right." But he's like, "Play a goddamn song. All right, give it up for music. Don't we love music?" Again, I'm like, the more people got pissed, the funnier it got. And then, how are you punk rock and not realizing that they're punk rocking you? You're punk rock. They're doubling down on your punk rockism. That's when I first saw Harmar Superstar. It was an Alkaline Trio hot water music show at the Empty Bottle, and Sha Na Na opened, and nobody knew what Harmar Superstar was. And so Alkaline Trio played, but then Harmar came out in just a leotard, just singing R&B songs, and to watch the crowd just split in half of like thinking it's hilarious, and the other half like, what the fuck is this shit, man? Trying to be a grown man and cry to hot water music. I'm trying to think about if I want to build a table or not to hot water music. What's this tulip up here dancing around?
When was that? Like the like the 90s or 2000s?
Yeah, I bet that was like probably 99 or 2000 maybe.
So when you started when your career started off, did you go to a lot? I'm gonna start wrapping this up soon, but did you when you started taking off and doing a lot of shit, were you still living in Chicago and still going to shows?
Yeah, I left. I moved to LA in 2003. Once I started comedy, that was pretty much, I would still go to shows here and there, but I kind of fell off. Again, I wasn't even using I had another comedian showed me how to set up an email address. And so I wasn't really using the internet to find out about shows. And then I was now going to hang out at comedy shows more than I was bands. And then when I got to LA, any of the music I like was always skipping LA because it's not, you guys, if you're not the of the moment hot thing, nobody gave a shit. I also desperately needed to diversify my musical interests. So I got into like more metal and heavier stuff. And some of that was playing. I'd go see some Clutch shows. Clutch was great and stuff here and there. There was a little scene. They had Five Star Bar in LA and some bands would come through, and I met some of the San Diego dudes like Madison Bloodbath and Tilt Wheel and those kind of guys.
Oh, Davey Tiltwheel. Yeah, I used to hang out with him in San Diego.
Old Davey Tilt Wheel, yeah.
Yeah, he's a wild character, man.
Jay Wang's new band is awesome. Commoners? Is it called Commoners? No, Come Closer. They're great. They sound like Sugar, like Bob Mold's band, Sugar. They're really good. He just sent me their new album.
What was it? A guy who filled in, this guy Paul, he was filling on drums for a minute with Tiltwheel, and then he ended up being the drummer for Heads On?
Off with their heads.
Off with Their Heads, thank you. Yes, he filled in on the drums for them for a while, and then lived in Portland, and then he quit like a couple years after that.
Okay, yeah, they off with their heads. At Ryan's my merch. He runs Anxious and Angry. He does everybody's merch.
Really?
I know. Yeah, I saw them. They actually Pegboy. They played with Pegboy. They were out with him in New York. Yeah, so I've known Ryan for a while. He was in LA for a bit, so I'd see him. He's in Chicago now.
Do you get to like meet a lot of bands? Like, if you like when you're on the road or something? Because I know you said you open up for something, doing comedy for shows. Like, have you got to meet bands that you idolized like at a show?
Yeah, it's when I found out that that's what bands listen to in the van. Like, we love comedy, but we don't want to listen to more music when we get in the van. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's fine. I did a show in Huntington Beach, which I always just like make fun of Huntington Beach because
it sucks.
it's Huntington Beach. It's Pennywise for fighting and Sublime for fucking. So many cauliflower ears waiting to take offense at things. After the show, I was like talking to some guys, and they're like, there's a very Southern California look of like, oh, you're successful, but you're in it. And these guys are kind of in their 50s or whatever. Like, oh yeah, we're in a band. I'm like, oh, what band? Like, oh, the Vandals. I'm like, wait, what? All the Vandals were at my show at this bowling alley. That's awesome.
Holy shit! Was Josh Freese there?
I don't know which is which.
He's the drummer. He plays for like Perfect Circle, and now he's playing for the Foo Fighters.
I know, that's the name that I just know that I've seen written. Couldn't tell you who's who. All I knew was Joe Escalante because he would have a show on when I moved to LA. It wasn't K Rock. They started this other show, 103.1, and it was still like a Clear Channel show, but the morning show was Dickie Barrett from the Bosstones. And they would play like Naked Ray Gun. 8 a.m. I'm going to work and I'm hearing Face to Face on the radio. Like, this is awesome. But yeah, so I knew that Joe Escalante had like a segment. He was like a DJ on there, but he's also a lawyer.
Yeah, he's always been a lawyer.
Yeah, and he was giving out, like, people would call in and get legal advice from him.
Yeah, and I always forgot that he owned Kung Fu Records.
Oh, is that his?
Yeah.
You know what? You just saved my ass because there was a compilation I was trying to remember, and I think it was a Kung Fu Records comp because it was like Bo Evil's Blink, but it was Sublime. It was all over the place.
Yeah, Blink. They had that one song on that one,
like Eminem's or something.
Let me see.
Old drummer Blink.
Yeah, it was fuck. What was that guy's name? Scott. That was it. Punk is your friend. Punk on Wild. Yeah, I'm just like looking this up just in case.
I'm gonna look. It was Kung. I was trying to think of it the other day, and I was like, I think there was like a kid on a tricycle on the cover.
This is actually cool because this is showing me like other bands, like Sort of Jelly Beans. This other one, Longfellow.
Longfellow. We played with them. I remember that name. Yeah, I think we played with them. I remember the fly. I think we played with them and the Thumbs.
The Thumbs. I definitely remember that band.
I remember those guys in Longfellow being cool for the one night that we hung out with them.
Well, cool, man. So, I'm gonna start wrapping this up. Before I ask the last two questions, is there a story that you've never told before anywhere that you'd like to tell now?
Oh boy. I mean, unfortunately not, because, my business is to spill the beans on everything. So I can't think of any little chestnut that I've been saving for a special occasion. Nothing. We want to talk about meeting bands after. I did tell a story when I taped a special at the Metro in Chicago about seeing the singer of Sam I Am almost get a blowjob on stage, and then now I know the guys. Like, I played the Golden Bowl in Oakland and stuff. He's like, yeah, all right, we were all crazy back then. I'm like, I never thought I'd know you and have to deal with the consequences of telling that story.
Holy shit. I would not expect that to happen at a Sam I Am show. Like, that doesn't
Well,
make any
nobody
sense.
did. There was the singer from a band called Luke Skywalker, because keep in mind the '90s.
All that rap music.
Yeah. It's like rap, I think. He kept yelling from the balcony to play a certain song. I think Jason's like, I'll play a song if you suck my dick. And this guy just went, welp, and just came down from the balcony, got on stage, and it was a literal game of gay chicken that was going on, where he was like, oh, okay. And then, like, the guy pulled his penis out of his pants. And I remember specifically the guy who was holding it between his thumb and his forefinger, looked at the audience, wiggled it, and then was like, went for it. And that's what Jason's like, all right, okay, all right, stop. We'll play the song.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
Actually, before I jump, something just popped in my mind because I'm just looking at your IMDb and like Wikipedia and stuff and all that stuff. You've done a lot of stuff and been on a lot of things. Like, what would you say was the most like awesome thing you've done? What's the thing Comedy Central? You get drunk and you tell a story.
Oh, Drunk History, yeah.
Drunk History. Like, didn't you do that, or did you? Because I saw you
I
do.
did a couple of those, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I saw that, and then I saw you also did that thing with Ari Shafir's thing where you get on stage and tell about like a really fucked up night or something.
Oh, yeah, it's called This Is Not Happening. I mean, that's just my act. That was just stand up anyway.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
oh, tell an embarrassing story. That's all I do. It's an act of, if an audience laughs at something terrible, it's this weird sort of. So what's the one with the church? Is non-secular religious, or is that the non-religious word?
I have no idea.
Secular is with non. It's like a non-secular forgiveness.
Okay.
Look it up. Put that in with lugubrious.
Is there like a thing you've done though where you're like, I can't, that was the coolest shit. I can't believe I got to do that.
I mean, I'm not trying to be schmuck. Like, I mean, all of it. Like, I didn't have a plan, and I didn't have a career of like, oh boy, I'm on a track to be a CPA, but I guess I should give this comedy thing a try. Like, it was an all-in kind of, and I just remember having like, like the entry-level jobs you get. And I remember being a temp at some filing warehouse for an insurance company or something as a temp job over the summer. And I just remember like talking with somebody bitching about like just doing the math of like, all right, so you commute an hour and a half every day to get to work 8 hours. There's 9.5 hours. And then you're going to sit there, and then you gotta eat, you gotta get home, make dinner. And then you're too tired to go out because you want to get a good night's sleep. And so then they just give you Friday and Saturday to think about what you could do. Sunday, you're bummed out about having to go back to work. And like, and that's it until you maybe retire, which isn't even an opportunity for people anymore. And I remember just thinking about that math and just thinking like, I guess I just got to go for it on anything, because I can't imagine sitting at one of these jobs. I wonder what would happen if I would have tried. And I think realizing that came around the same time I was starting comedy, because with the band, everybody's like, we're gonna be rock stars, we're gonna do it, guys, it's gonna happen, I could feel it, listen to this song. And we're all just, you're pumping each other up and celebrating. But with the stand-up thing, I think it was like, oh, here's a little glimmer of I might be okay at this thing, and it makes me happy. It might not turn into money, but it makes me happy, and I'm kind of good at it, so I'm going to keep trying this thing, because the alternative is to just take whatever entry level warehouse management forklift kind of job and wonder what if. And so I didn't see that being a good choice. I had friends that were talking about, well, when I retire, maybe I'll do this thing I want to do. I'm like, you're 23. You're gonna plan on taking that trip. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that enjoy yourself song. Like the lyrics of that are, I listen to that like once a week just to remind myself.
Wait, which song is this?
I've heard it covered. I mean, I've heard it done by, I think it was like Louis Prima or Todd Snyder, but it's called Enjoy Yourself. Specials did a cover of it,
Okay.
and it's just about like life's shorter than you think. It's like what's the tell yourself you'll take that ocean cruise. I don't know. It's all about like everything's short and it's shorter than you think. So you should be doing the stuff you want to do in the moment. And I took that stuff to heart. So.
Did you ever a point where like you were kind of like almost through your career like almost talked yourself out of it and like I don't want to do this anymore?
Oh yeah, I mean, you live in LA where everybody's
Sucks.
you're broke, and I was working at one job, and then at my lunch break, I was trying to drive. I was trying to go pick up fabric for this other warehouse in my car and get it back in an hour instead of eating lunch for an extra $20 a day. And at the same time, I remember I got my identity stolen,
Jesus.
and then I got held up. Me and Matt Bronger were leaving a show, and we got we got robbed at gunpoint. That was crazy. So we got held up. I'm like, oh God, let's just get out of here. And I went, and then I'm trying to look for the car, but I didn't realize I'd parked in a permit zone. So we actually got robbed in the place where my car had been towed from.
Oh,
So, so like we had to go to the tow yard. I can't get I got no money in my bank. I got my identity stolen. I was like, maybe the forklift thing isn't so bad. Maybe I can get, if I can get union, maybe I can really start like, what do you do? But instead, it's just like, hey, why don't you moved away from your family and friends to tell jokes? Why don't you take it seriously out here? You're just drinking and partying all the time. And then the comedy became the side effect. It's tough. It's in bars. You're going to a place, you're going to a bar to pursue your dream. And oh boy, you start getting like, a couple drinks will loosen me up. Well, 3 drinks is better than 2 drinks as far as getting loose. And then I'm like, oh, I'm being laughed at, not laughed with. I probably maybe would have gotten to this point sooner if I didn't need to grease the wheels for so many years. But I don't think, yeah, that's one of the one things I don't want to get too sentimental about because it's still ongoing.
yeah, that's fine.
Like I still have to stay relevant and still not like, well, at my age, the things that you kids are taught, like I don't want to be a youth freak, but I don't want to just purposely separate myself from somebody 20 years younger than me by choosing to not be relevant or choosing to not understand what's happening with somebody that's, in their 20s.
Yeah, like not taking what they're going through currently, like not being like a 40 something and just being like, fuck the 20, like your problems are bullshit.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to age yourself is to be like, well, it's again like, oh, I'm sure that thing is good. It's not for me. I bet your problems are real. I don't know about them, but I'm not going to discredit the fact that the world is probably terrifying if you're 24 right now, knowing you might never own a house. What is the gray wave of how many retirees are just going to need health care and everything without working? Like, yeah, it's not, I can't say I would be optimistic if I was 23. I'm not going to just slough that off. I'm not going to like subscribe to the fashion or try to be like, look at me, I'm a young dude too. Like that's disingenuous, but I think it just comes back to being like honest with yourself and open to other people's experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I just think just in general, like what I appreciate is when I see in any platform or any art, it's like if someone's just being self-reflective and talking about themselves, and because you can relate to it in some way. And I don't know, I just find that to be like, oh, it's fascinating, like that person's going through that, or this is like their personal life. I get to see I get a little window into that, but they did it, and it's like funny, or it's a song, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, is it narcissism if you still don't like the choices, but you think about yourself all the time, but you're like, boy, I fucked that one up. I don't know if that still falls under narcissism.
Probably.
some sort of self-obsession. But.
Oh man. All right, dude. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. Before I ask the last question, would you like to plug? It could be about you. It could be about a friend. It could be about both.
Oh man, I'll play. I know when's this coming out?
Let's see. I got one, two. I think I have like 2 interviews for you. So I was doing it like once a week. So I think I'm kind of spreading them out a little bit. So either the end of
Okay.
this middle December or beginning of January.
Well, all right. Well, I'll say this. So I do a podcast with my buddy Shane Torres called No Accounting for Taste, where that's the entire point of the podcast is we try to defend things that are people shit on all the time. Yesterday we recorded one about multi-level marketing schemes. That was tough. I don't think we successfully defended those because there really wasn't any way to do it. But so you can check that out. And Shane has a new special coming out, I think December 9th or 10th, called The Blue-Eyed Mexican. So I'll plug his new special, and I'll have a new one coming out in February, I think, called Dirt Nap. So
That's dope. Like when you do a special, do you have to like burn all that material and just start fresh?
I do, yeah.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah, though that's why it's like, oh, it's time to record this. Like I can't. There's this arc of like creating material, and it's shitty, and then oh, it's starting to come together, and it's fun, and then I keep adding more and more to it, and it's still really fun, and then at the top of that arc, I would like to record the special, but sometimes I keep adding too much, and it just turns into like when you're a kid left alone at Fuddruckers and you put too many toppings on the burger, and now it's just this sloppy, overwrought mess. And you're like, shit, man, I should have stopped. I should have recorded this 6 months ago. Now I don't even know what I'm talking about. So I think I did good with this last one. I think I got it right at the zenith there. So
That's awesome. That's so fucking cool. I don't know, I love comedy. I've loved comedy since I was a kid.
cool.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. Like I live in Raleigh, and Brian Callen was in town, and he happened to just be sitting behind me at this restaurant. I was at the bar, and I turn around, the bartender's like, is that guy's famous?" I was like, "Yeah, it's Brian Callen." And he gets up, and he's with this guy Nick. The fuck was this guy's name? He's like a newer comedian. He was touring with him. Nick Simmons. He's like a newer guy, and we just were bullshitting with these guys for like an hour, and it just was just like really nice. I was like, dude, like, how did you get involved in comedy? It's just so wild. And they were just being honest. I was like, I'm so fascinated by it. Just as a kid, I used to watch comedy specials all the time, and I just love it so much.
That's awesome. I'll be in Raleigh next year at some point. So
Yeah, dude, I definitely because you probably go to Good Nights. That's they just reopened
yeah, yeah.
here. It's awesome venue.
Yeah, I was in their cafeteria last year, so I'm going to that like old cafeteria space they were temporarily in. So I'll be in the new venue this time.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like I've seen some really good shit there. Oh, cool. All right, man. So last question: what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Oh, scene ethics. I remember somebody pointing out that just because you like the band, don't forget what else went into making that show happen. Like the band didn't book the venue, the band didn't apologize to like the actual veterans in the bar at the VFW for what 16-year-old thinks politics is at the time and make sure you could still have shows there. The people that made the merch and brought, that create flyers and promote the shows and street teams. So much comedy is DIY, and it mirrors that at the same time of like, oh, you think about who put on this show and like, oh, a lot of people didn't show up. Yeah, but some people did. So if there's 10 people there, then you do the show for those 10 people. You don't bitch about there only being 10 people. You'd be glad that, oh, there's 10 people here. You can't blame them for the people that didn't show up. Understanding how much effort goes into putting on independent shows for little to no recognition or money, and being appreciative of that. And then I think, oh boy, I don't know, most of them. You can make those things happen the same way I saw like, oh, how does 300 people know who Screeching Weasel is on a Sunday night and will stand in the cold waiting to see him? They did something at that point. They did something honest and something good, and it wasn't about fame. It was about creating something that they were proud of and putting some. At least that's how I interpret it, and that's how I approach comedy. It's like if you're being honest with yourself, that'll show through, and I think that's a recipe for longevity. You might not pop. I might not be famous, but I consider myself successful and that I get to keep doing it. So I think those are the ethics I stick with.